Hi guys, I know it's been a long time since I last posted a video. I think the last one I did was advice on weight loss, but I haven't been able to continue with my journey with that for a while now because I just had a baby. So my son was born 2 months ago on March 27th, and for the past couple of months I've just been focusing on being a mom. And when I was pregnant, I watched a lot of YouTube videos on labor and delivery and what childbirth was like because for me, I was just so afraid, and I didn't have any friends or family members that had recently had kids. So watching the experiences of other people really helped me with conquering my fears. Honestly, I didn't conquer my fears. I watched a lot of videos and it helped a little bit, but I was still totally terrified going into the process. So I wanted to do a video on what childbirth is really like because, if it can help you at all to relax going into your own labor and delivery, then it'll be worth it. So I'll just talk about my experience a little bit. When you go to prenatal classes, which I recommend you do, they'll tell you about the phases of labor. So early labor, active labor, and then the transition stage when you actually push. Early labor is when things are just getting going, when your body's just getting started. Usually that begins a number of ways. You can have your bloody show. Sometimes contractions start right away. And some people, they have their water break, and it goes really fast for them. For me, I had the bloody show and I went to the hospital right away because I hadn't seen any blood my whole pregnancy and I was a little bit freaked out. When I got there though, they checked me and I was only about a centimeter, so they sent me right back home. But when you get to the hospital, you can expect to have a pelvic exam, so they'll check to see how dilated and how effaced you are. That's how thinned out your cervix is. And they might do a non-stress test, which is where they put bands around your stomach and monitor your contractions and your baby's heartbeat. And they just want to do that to see if your baby's heartbeat is still strong, because if it is and you're not progressing, then they can go ahead and send you home. But if they are noticing your baby's heart rate is in decels or deceleration, slowing down, they might need to go ahead and deliver your baby sooner. So they might go ahead with a C-section or they might induce you. So that's what you can expect when you first get there. As far as when to go to the hospital, it's really different for everyone. I know that here where I live, they recommended that you go when your contractions are 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute. And I did do that later after they sent me home the first time. I waited until my contractions were 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute, and I still hadn't progressed. So they told me maybe wait until they're 3 minutes apart. So it's really not exact. So when the class tells you, oh, early labor is about 10 hours or 5 to 10 hours and go when your contractions are 5 minutes apart, it might not be that simple. So just prepare yourself for the fact that you might be going back and forth from hospital to home a few times, and that it might not be the time. But I took my hospital bag with me every time just in case. So, so keep an eye out for those early signs, the bloody show, contractions, and of course your water breaking. For me, my baby was 10 days late, and so I knew that when the contractions started, they were for real. And I never had any Braxton Hicks contractions before, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what those are like. But I think I think we all know, you're having these contractions for the first time, and and definitely go to the hospital if you think you need to. You wouldn't want to have any regrets. Better safe than sorry. So, but if you're wondering, what do contractions feel like? It's like someone puts a band around your midsection and tightens it, or kind of like maybe an electric shock, like you're being tased around your midsection. And for me, they came in waves. So it would start and then it would get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it would release. And it happened for me every 5 minutes for 4 days was what early labor was like for me. So it's basically how they describe it to you in your prenatal classes as a tightening. Some people get it more in their back. For me, it was right in the lower stomach where my uterus is. And it's pretty painful, I'm not going to lie. But there were some things that I could do to make it feel a little bit better. Like I got into a hot bath, and that really helped. And I used a hot water bottle on my lower back, which really helped. But after a while, it didn't quite do the trick. And after those 4 days, I was exhausted and I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. So I went ahead and went to the hospital. So once you get to the hospital and when you are 4 centimeters or so dilated, they will admit you. And then at that point, they'll put an IV in your hand so that they can give you fluids and medication should you need it later on in the process. And that's no big deal. I know that some people are even afraid of getting the IV, but it's just a little needle and then you put some tape over top and it's over in a flash, no big deal at all. And then they'll get you situated in a bed and you'll have your gown on and they'll continue to check you and see how you're progressing. At that point, you know, if the doctors feel that your labor isn't progressing fast enough naturally, they may want to consider a medication such as Pitocin. And what that does is it causes your contractions to be stronger and closer together and it just gets your labor going more quickly. So that's what they did for me. They gave me Pitocin and they just put it in through your IV and it gets things going. When you are admitted, that time when you're admitted, you've got your IV, that's the time when I would recommend talking to the nurses and the doctors about any specific requests that you have, any concerns, any fears. You know, when they talk about the birth plan in your prenatal class, this is the time to discuss those things. And for me, the only concern I really had was pain. And I wanted to make sure they knew that I wanted an epidural. So everybody that I saw, epidural, epidural. So I was admitted to the hospital about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And at 6 o'clock, I got my epidural. And I know a lot of people are really afraid of that. So I'll tell you what it was like for me. They had me sit on the hospital bed and they took the little table that they swing over in front of the table with your meals and they just had me scoot over to the edge of the bed and then put my arms over top of the table and then arch my back. My husband held my hands and they told me to stay perfectly still and they injected a small needle into my back, which was a needle to numb the area. And then they put another needle in there and what he did was he put a little tube into, just really small, into my back so that the medicine would flow through that tube and numb me. And honestly, you guys, it's not a big deal at all. It was over so fast and it was just kind of a little bit of a tingly sensation when they put the needle in. No pain, like it was not painful at all. I would do that every day a few times if I had to. You know, I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, I'm so scared. I don't know if I can do this. But I told myself, hey, you can do this. It's just a needle, not a big deal, you can do this. And then I did, so it was awesome. But unfortunately, that epidural didn't work. I'm not sure if the doctor was new at it or something, but it froze the wrong part of me. It made my legs fall asleep, but I felt everything in the middle. So I had another epidural later in the day. And I'm not going to get too in depth with this because I'm planning on posting a labor and delivery story. So I'll tell you more about what my actual experience was like. But like at the end of the day, the main message that you should take away from this is epidurals are no big deal. And you can totally handle it. It's over so fast. It probably took a minute or 2 minutes at the very most. And when it worked, I didn't feel anything in the middle. Like before that, after the first failed epidural, I was still feeling the contractions and I'd been feeling them for 4 days. So I told the nurses basically like, put me out of my misery. I can't do this. Like I'm going to need a C-section or something. I can't do this anymore. So when I had the epidural that worked, it was like they switched off the pain and the Pitocin was free to do its job and get things going more quickly. And 2 hours later, the doctors checked me and they said that I was ready to go. But before that, before they checked me and said I was ready to go, I knew I was. And that's because I had the strangest feeling. I didn't know what to expect when it was time to push. But about 2 hours after they started giving me the Pitocin, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom so bad. I felt like I had to do a number 2. And I heard people talk about the fact that when you push, some poop might come out. So I was expecting that, but I wasn't expecting this overwhelming feeling of having to go. So the nurse said, go ahead, go to the bathroom. But I did, and I sat there and nothing would come out. So I thought, what the heck? What's going on here? And then the nurses said, well, maybe it's the baby. And I was like, oh, no kidding. Like, I've been in labor for 5 days. Maybe the baby's finally ready to come out. But that's what it felt like. It felt like I had to take the worst number 2 of my whole life. And so sure enough, I went, doctor checked me, and it was time to go. And they couldn't tell when I was having contractions just because the belts weren't working properly. But I knew when I was having a contraction because I'd get that urge to number 2. So my doctor said, go ahead and push. And when I got that urge, I pushed like I was having to do the worst number 2 of my life. And that's what I did for 45 minutes, maybe every minute or 2 apart. It felt like only 10 minutes though, like it was so fast. And it was not painful at all. It just felt like pressure. And then I felt his head pop out and then the rest of his body, and that was it. She actually did cut me. I had an episiotomy. I didn't feel a thing. Like they had put something up there to monitor his heartbeat by attaching something to his head. I didn't feel that. Didn't feel when they were checking me. I didn't feel the episiotomy. I didn't feel the stitches. She pressed my lower stomach, my uterus, to get the placenta to come out. I didn't feel that. Epidurals are a wonderful thing, I tell ya. Like, I highly recommend it, but I didn't feel anything, and I was really afraid for the days after birth because I was afraid of how much it would hurt. But in the moments after you give birth, they ask you to go have a shower, and there's a lot of blood, but it's no big deal. You just clean yourself off, you put on a pad and the mesh underwear that the hospital gives you, you settle into your hospital bed with your baby, and you're just fine. But I was afraid of when the epidural was going to wear off, and so when it did, I was expecting the worst because people talk about not being able to sit down for a week, but for me, no pain at all. Not like nothing. The nurses kept asking me if I wanted morphine or Tylenol, and I didn't need anything. So it wasn't bad for me, and it might not be for you either. If you have severe tearing, it would be different. But for me, I did have that episiotomy, and it was no big deal. I had some stitches, and I used a peri bottle, the squirt bottle when I went to the bathroom for, a week or 2 after birth, but no big deal at all. I highly recommend when you get home using Depends. I know that sounds funny, but you just, then you don't have to worry about leaks or anything. You just slide them on and you can focus on, learning breastfeeding and that sort of thing with your baby. But yeah, it was just no big deal. So that was my experience of the different phases of childbirth. You guys, it's just, I wish someone had told me not how painful it is, but how wonderful it is, how empowering it is. It was my biggest fear. And in the moments after delivering, not only did I have my little boy in my arms, and he had my pointy little chin, and I looked into his eyes and couldn't believe this was my son, but I also knew that I'd conquered my biggest fear. I'd given birth. I did the most painful thing, and it wasn't such a big deal, and it's true what they say. Shortly afterward, everything, the memory of the pain kind of fades. I feel like I would do it again tomorrow, which sounds kind of crazy because it's only been 2 months now. It's been 8 weeks, and I feel like I would do it again. So don't listen to the people that say that it's so scary and so awful. The biggest piece of advice I can give you is choose to be optimistic. Yes, a number of things can go wrong during childbirth, and there are sad stories and there are scary stories, but choose to think positively. Believe that the best is going to happen to you, because it might not be so bad. Like for me, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And it just truly was the most empowering, wonderful moment I've ever experienced. I've instantly fell in love with my little boy. My life has so much more meaning now. I live for him. I feel like I've realized my destiny. And it didn't hurt that bad at all. Your body's meant to do it, and it just happened. And just relax, It wasn't until I had that epidural that I could really relax, and my labor really started to progress. And I think that's because in my mind I was so scared that I couldn't really progress in my labor until I just chilled out. So relax and just feel confident. Know that you can do this, because you totally can. Like they say, women all over the world and throughout history have been doing this forever, and you can too. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. And like I said, I will be posting labor and delivery story videos soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.